Sequential move games are games in which at least some players move in sequence. That is, some players move earlier than other players, and later players get to observe at least some of the behavior of earlier players. Such sequential games are often depicted in game trees. Here player 1 gets to move first, and one of his possible actions is the action A1-1. Player 2 then observes whether that action has been played. Having observed the action A1-1 by player 1, player 2 then starts at what we call an information node. At that node, the player has information that player 1 has played a particular action. Player 2 can then choose from the actions A1-2 and A2-2. At the bottom of a game tree, we find the payoffs that players receive depending on how the game has been played. Given that player 1 has taken the action A1-1 and player 2 has taken the action A1-2, we depict the payoffs for player 1 and for player 2. We depict them here in utility terms, with player 1 getting the payoff U1, given that A1-1 and A1-2 has been played, and player 2 getting U2, given that A1-1 and A1-2 have been played. If player 2 instead plays the action A2-2, then we might get different payoffs depicted at the bottom of the A2-2 branch of the game tree. Again, we list player 1's payoff first, U1, given that A1-1 and A2-2 have been played, followed by player 2's payoff. The game will evolve differently if player 1 makes a different choice in stage 1. Here we assume that player 1 has a second action he could choose, the action A2-1. Choosing that action then leads to a second information node for player 2, the information node where player 2 knows that player 1 has just played the action A2-1. From the right information node, player 2 then again can choose from the actions A1-2 and A2-2, just as she could from the left information node. It doesn't necessarily have to be the case in a sequential game that the actions that player 2 can take are always the same from every information node, but in this game we've assumed that they are. Player 2 taking the action A1-2 from her right information node then leads to the payoffs depicted at the bottom of that branch of the game tree. And player 2 taking the action A2-2 potentially leads to different payoffs along that branch of the game tree. Sequential games can take many different forms, with different types of actions available at different information nodes, and with players potentially playing in more than one stage of the game. The game might even contain some stages in which the players move simultaneously, whereas there are other stages where they move sequentially. Game trees can therefore also take many different forms, and this particular game tree is just one example to illustrate the concept of a game tree.